When I first met Christian, he was extraordinarily thin, having lost an enormous amount of weight for The Machinist, which he was about to go off and shoot.
He did call me and say, well, you know, how do you look right now, you know? Like, how am I gonna seriously be able to suggest to Warner Brothers that you could play Batman ever if, you know, you're that skinny?
He then proceeded to put on a lot of weight in muscle terms and really try and bulk up, because I had impressed upon him the idea that for Bruce Wayne to really fill that suit, he was going to have to be very, very large.
I was just stuffing my face all day long and lifting heavy weights and eating more, and eventually went up to like 220 pounds.
I hadn't met Christian, and I was expecting to meet this bag of bones. And I went, oh my God.
I just listened to what he said about get as big as you possibly can. So that's what I did, you know? But I was kind of like a bear. I wasn't really like a martial arts, you know, guy all lean and ripped and everything like that.
I had to very sort of gently suggest to him that he you know, cut down a bit.
I could see the look on Chris's face, you know? He looked at me and it was like, oh, Christ, you know, what has this guy done?
There was a moment where he was really big and we were thinking, God, is he gonna fit the bat suit? Is it, you know, how is this gonna work?
It was a moment of panic where I realized, oh, crap, you know? I took Chris at his exact word about get as big as you can, but he didn't really think I was gonna get that big. A number of the crew I'd worked with on previous movies, they looked at me and they were like, bloody hell, Chris, what are we doing here? Fat Man or Batman? And so I realized, okay, that's not what he had meant. So I had to then try and lose a lot of weight.
We worked on his stamina and built his muscle tone so we could bring his body back up to being what it needed to be for Batman. And Christian knew anyway, because he was such a focused guy. He knew his own body.
Hello there. Good. Very nice.
Christian showed extraordinary levels of self-discipline and dedication to the role to be able to do that. A lot of actors, when you start working with them, they'll say they're going to lose a bit of weight for the part or whatever, and the wardrobe people will kind of roll their eyes and go, yeah, sure, because they very often don't. And I had to warn the wardrobe people on this film that he was actually going to do what he said he was going to do.
It really was. It was a very tight schedule, but I just about managed it before we started filming.
I think the closest to what I saw for Batman that I had seen in another film was probably the Dick Donner Superman film from 1978. And one of the things that made that film so epic was the great casting. I felt that Batman deserved a similarly epic treatment, and so we decided to go for the best actors and the best stars possible, so the principals are all fleshed out with these wonderful supporting roles. You know, I mean, it's just a spectacular cast around Christian.
Just know that there are those of us who care about what you do with your future.
Haven't given up on me yet.
Never.
It's essential that Alfred is a credible father figure because he is the person who raises Bruce Wayne.
In the Civil War, your great-great-grandfather was involved in the Underground Railroad, secretly transporting freed slaves to the north.
And I suspect he found these cabins handy.
Casting Michael Caine in this role allows us to create a really wonderfully rounded character who really can be a true father, surrogate father to Bruce Wayne. Liam Neeson plays Ducard, who is this mentor to Bruce. He essentially teaches Bruce all kinds of techniques of martial arts and so forth, but I think he also offers him a level of guidance, and at a time when Bruce is really looking for answers.
What's great about Liam is Liam ultimately plays one of the villains, and he's never played a villain before. And he always plays these sort of fatherly, avuncular, mentor-like characters, which he does need to play in this film, but when he turns, he really turns.
See one more of those?
We first talked about the character of Lucius Fox. I said to Chris, well, the only person that can play this is Morgan Freeman.
And we felt it was important to connect Bruce's assembling of the tools to become Batman, and Lucius Fox helps him in his quest to become Batman without ever knowing exactly what Bruce's quest is. He knows there's something going on, but there's a sort of interesting unspoken understanding between the two men.
Gary Oldman was an idea that Chris had, and he doesn't seem like the obvious choice given some of the roles he's played.
I think Gary Oldman has never really played such a wholesome character. He's played a lot of bad guys, Gary, but he is a chameleon, and he inhabits the role of Gordon.
The really cool thing about Gary Oldman's performance in Batman Begins is that if you look at Frank Miller's Batman Year One and the depiction of Gordon in that comic, that's exactly what Gary did. I look at Gary in the movie and I don't even think of him as Gary Oldman. He just seems like Gordon.
It was important for us to have a person who was close to Bruce from childhood, knew him before all of these things went wrong.
Rachel, who's played by Katie Holmes, is a very strong character in her own right, and she's not at all the damsel in distress.
What these great actors bring is a sense of three-dimensional reality, the sense of a real world in which Batman and Bruce Wayne is functioning. And it's very satisfying to look at the finished product and realize how much of it does stem absolutely directly from those first months where it was just us on our own, throwing ideas around.
I am gonna stop you. You never did learn to mind your surroundings.
The very first time that I'd met with Chris after him asking me to play the role, he had said, you know, he really wanted me to be involved in the fighting technique so that it kind of looked organic and looked like something that I had invented myself.
I wanted to take it back to a grubbier place. A place where you feel the punches a bit more and you're actually a bit more concerned about the violence on screen.
Action.
I think there's been a lot of very, well, I think excessive use of, you know, wire work and martial arts and everything, to the point where the violence loses its threat because it's become a bit, I think, a bit dance-like, and we've become sort of comfortable watching it in that way.
You know, if you're in a fight situation, if Batman's got someone behind him and he can turn around and knock him out, headbutt him, why not? Why do a triple spin kick, double loop, you know, why not just knock him out? We were looking for something that, when Batman threw a punch or a kick, it went through the person like a raging bull. Once we started along those lines, and one of the stuntmen we had on the film, Buster Reeves, who's a jiu-jitsu world champion and extremely talented in martial arts, mentioned to Dave Foreman about a new martial arts system called Casey, or Casey Fighting Method. Casey means from the heart, and it's also the nickname for the two founders of KFM, Husto and Andy Norman. Andy and Husto, they developed Casey over 20 years. They analysed tapes, they watched moves, all the different martial arts forms to develop it, put it together. And it's absolutely fantastic. Take it away, boys. Throughout all the fighting movies, we've seen the traditional taekwondo, Muay Thai, the karate. We've seen all that, but we haven't seen KFM. In terms of martial arts, like Wushu has been created over hundreds of years. This is very, very new, and it's still evolving. It's very much about being mentally aware of your environment, mentally aware of how people behave and respond to actions and reactions. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to kill this man, or do you want to maim him? And that comes from you as a person. So, you know, it is a lethal art.
It's very practical. I mean, these guys actually train often in nightclubs and things, and they will smoke up the room, and it's all about using what's available and grabbing that ashtray and smacking somebody with it, or being able to have a fight with somebody while sitting next to them. And it's a really great fighting style.
And we felt that was exactly what we wanted for Batman, someone who, if he feels like he's going to headbutt you, that's what he does.
It's just an emotional response. We've had to kind of tame it down a bit, and it's to adapt their system into Dave Foreman's choreography.
And action. And because it's so tight and a tight fighting style, I had to adapt to make the moves bigger. So if I was throwing a punch to the face, I would just make that bigger. I would just make the circle bigger. The demonstration you just saw, I don't think you could actually break that down unless you saw that in slow motion. You couldn't quite see what was happening there, but the boys were actually breaking down each bone as they went up from the legs to the head. So it is something that you need a lot of control on, and so we move very, very slowly, and we build up layers till we feel very, very comfortable with it. Wonderful. Well done, boys.
Christian has unbelievable stamina. I mean, I've seen his workload every day. And if he does get 2 hours off in the morning, he has to rehearse a fight.
Parents' stuff, it's not your fault. It's your father's.
We had 16 fights in the movie for Christian to get through.
Or you'd rather assume the deflection kind of up there and they get away and bang. Yeah.
Because he had such a heavy workload, we did a lot of blocking of the fights with stunt guys and just liaising with Chris Nolan on tape. Then we'd bring Christian in, put the acting element into the fight and perhaps tweak a few bits that felt character-wise like they should change.
And they would make the changes. And then when we'd get on set, they'd all change again.
In terms of the fights, Christian learnt every single fight. He did every single fight.
The Casey fighting was very close quarters, so it was a very dangerous art. The hits were very direct to very dangerous parts of the body, so we had to be very, very careful as not to injure our actors or our stuntmen, of course. A lot of the hits were like 2-3 inches away from the target, so every time.
Absolutely respect the stuntmen. This is what they do, and they can obviously do any of it in a vastly superior way to what I can do. But I always like to try it, you know? And I like the possibility of being able to have some kind of stunt sequence, and then you can zoom in and whatever, and you see that it's a real person.
Basically, Christian learnt fights very quickly. He'd go home at night and he'd watch the tapes, and he'd literally come in the next day and know the fights. He has a photographic memory, so I would show him a fight, and it sickens me. Because, I'd show him 20 moves, and then within half an hour, he would have all those 20 moves down. I can't do that, and I'm the fighter ranger.
I am the devil.
You're not the devil. You're practice.
We all dream that we can take on 8 men at once and beat them all. And that's what the Bhutanese fight is like.
We see Bruce, younger. He has no fighting skills whatsoever. There's no technique to him. He's adopted different styles, but he hasn't created his own style yet.
We wanted to demonstrate that he had some skill, but it was really more about courage and brutality. We brought 11 guys over from Thailand, put the moves together, discussed them, said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if, or shouldn't he be stronger here?
He wanted 8 guys coming at one guy all at once, and I had real trouble with that, because for 8 guys to attack one guy all at once is how am I going to put a fight? How am I going to choreograph? It was really quite hard
to have them all coming at him, so that he's having to work triple time to take care of them, as opposed to people standing waiting to get up at the corner of their eye, coming in, taking their hit. We found what helped that was to keep him moving. So by keeping him moving, people could drop in his wake and then come into him as well. Bang! Christian did the whole thing, actually. And Buster sort of did a few little inserts, but Christian did the whole fight.
We spent a lot of time determining exactly how much of Batman to show, how much of his fighting to show, and I had always looked to a representation of Batman that would be more from the criminal's point of view. So you would see less of him. You would see him as more frightening. There would be more suspense as to what he was doing and where he was.
Where are you?
Here. And that meant showing less of him, cutting fight scenes very, very fast, so that Batman is seen as being blindingly quick and aggressive and almost animal-like in the way he takes on the criminals.
You will never learn.
The monorail was the biggest challenge because it was the finale and we all want a big showdown. Batman is on equal terms now with Ducard. I think we feel that they are equal to each other. It was punch for punch, kick for kick, and that's what made it very intense and dynamic.
Now we can really focus on using the Casey style at the end, and it's worked out really strong.
As a team, all of us, we all put that fight together and that energy together.
Liam and Christian were keen to be involved, to rehearse. In fact, you know, if they weren't doing anything, they'd actually call and say, look, you know, why don't we rehearse? Liam was a strong fighter. Casey's actually a fighting system where you use a lot of elbows and fists, and Liam's very tall. I think he's 6'4", 6'5". He's a tall guy. So he has to get very low in order to do the blows.
Ready, and action.
We just wanted it to be as hard as possible. We wanted to show two men who are very highly trained and very highly skilled, very motivated.
When I saw the enjoyment out of when Liam had finished the sequence and Christian, you could just see the glee in their face when they finished that sequence, when they've just done 10, 15 move sequence. And that's the best.
Got it there. Right, so you guys all right? Yes.
I was extraordinarily impressed with the speed and the degree of intensity that the actors were able to get into the action scenes by doing things themselves rather than having the stunt performers do things for them. There's something in action and in fighting that is still very much performance, and so as a director I find it to be a great advantage to have actors like Liam, like Christian, who are willing to just dive in and express the character's physicality, even in the most extreme situations.
You never learn to mind your surroundings.
My biggest challenge was to make the KFM, the KC, work on screen. And hopefully it's new, creative, and that's what's good about the KFM. You can be creative with it. You can be very creative with it.
It was just kind of bizarre enough to get your attention and think, what the hell is he doing? And then absolutely vicious enough, but also practical enough to believe it.
KC reflected quite nicely our overall approach in terms of script and design of seeing Batman not as a glamorous sort of branded figure, decorative figure, but as a functional entity.